and welcome back to Amateur Endeavors. We are on our third episode of making different skirts, and now we are on to something of a split skirt. This is the lovely one that I found on Pinterest. I think it's just kind of a neat skirt. It's not overly complicated. It's not particularly detailed. Its main selling point is that split down the front with the laces, but it's just so cute. And it's really interesting, and I really am excited to make it today. So first we're going to have to draft a pattern just like we do, but then we should be able to get started on making our third skirt. Come and join me. Okay, so the actual composition of the skirt is fairly simple. It's mainly going to be 4 different pieces, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to start with the main front piece, and most of these I'm going to cut on the fold just so that way we have symmetrical on both sides. It just makes things a little bit easier. But our main front piece is going to be this kind of triangle shape. So the fold is going to be along this side here, and then it's just going to jut out on this side, and it's going to be level on these 2 ends. And then we're going to have the side piece, and this one's going to look very similar to the front piece, but this one's not going to be cut on the fold. It's going to be 2 separate pieces that are cut individually. And then our next piece is going to be our back piece, and it's going to be pretty much identical to our front piece. It's just going to be bigger. But otherwise, it's going to look pretty much the exact same from angles to level on top and bottom. It's just going to be bigger. Then our last piece is just going to be a very simple rectangle, and that's just going to be our waistband that we're going to attach all the different pieces together. Now, the way that we're going to do all of this is that we want to make sure that all of our top seams add up together to become our waist size. So my waist is a very solid 38 inches. So we are going to try and make sure that all of these add up to 38. Now, the thing to consider right now is that these 2 are on the fold, so whatever we put here has to be doubled. Same thing with this one, just a little different. There's going to be 2 of these, so whatever we put up here will have to be doubled. So the best way to kind of make sure that we're on track is we're just going to cut this in half. 38 divided by 2 is 19. So we just want to make sure that these guys add up to roundabouts 19. I think I'm going to bump it up to 20 just for seam allowance sake. So our goal is going to be 20 inches. Alright, to find our measurements for these, we're kind of going to go through the process of elimination. So I took the front measurement of my waist kind of above my knees because I know that's where I want the 2 slits to go on this skirt. And so that measured about 14 inches or so. So I'm going to cut that in half and say 7 for this one because remember it's going to fold out to 14. So that gets us our first measurement. And then we come over to the side pieces, and we're basically going to take from where, again, one above my knees where the slits start, and then we're just going to measure from there around to about the middle side of our waist. So, you know, where the seam of your pants usually is on the side of you. And I measured that, and it was round about 5. We don't have to cut this one in half because remember we just took from that split part where we want our split to be to the side. So that is one full measurement of what we need. It's going to be doubled on the skirt itself, but for this piece specifically, we just need the single measurement. Now, like I said, this was process elimination, so we only have one more measurement we need. And so our goal is 20 inches, and that minus these 2, that's 12. So 20 minus 12 is just going to be 8. And so now we have 8 inches for this one, and that will get us 20 in total. And then once everything is laid out, this is going to be 14 at full length. This is going to be 16 at full length plus 10 over here because we're going to have 2 of these. And that should give us right at exactly 40 inches. So that gives us all of our lengths to get our waist measurement plus a little bit extra for seam allowance, which is perfect. But now we need these bottom measurements here. And how do we find that? So that one is a little bit more loosey-goosey. It kind of depends on how wide you want your skirt to be. A general rule of thumb for, just a basic general skirt is you want your bottom to be twice as big around as your top. But the more inches you give, the wider and more full the skirt will be. That's why a circle skirt is like 5-10 times as wide around, but that's because it goes full circle. But we don't need that for this one. This is a little bit more of an A-line, not quite as full, so we're just going to double it. So this one was 7 up top, and on the fold, it's going to be 14 on bottom. This one is 5 up top, it's going to be 10 on the bottom, and likewise 8, 16. And these 2 are going to be doubled once they're folded out, and this one's going to be doubled just because there's 2 of them. And then the last measurement we need is going to be for our waistband. The long ways one is really simple. We're just going to take 40, the combination of all of these added together, which was our goal to begin with. And then our short end here is just going to be how wide we want our waistband to be, plus like an inch or so for seam allowance. So I want mine to be, let's say, about 2 inches. So this one's going to be kind of short. It only needs to be about 5 inches, and that'll give me plenty of space and plenty of room for the kind of narrow waistband that I'm looking for. But these are the only pieces that we're going to need, and now we are ready to cut them out.
Alright, and so this is going to be the fabric I am using for today's skirt. It is a beautiful green velvet, and when you're working with velvet, you want to make sure you go with the grain. You do not want to have a skirt that is randomly going against the grain. It just kind of feels funny, and it looks weird if they're going in opposite directions. So I'm going to make my first piece up against this fold on this side, and I'm just kind of taking my measurements as I wrote them down and making sure that I measure things level and make sure that things are going in the right way. I'm also going to be using my rotary cutter. It just kind of handles the velvet a little bit easier than your basic scissors, but basic scissors would just work just as well. Now that I have the outside edge measured and the length of my skirt piece all drawn out, I'm just going to come along the bottom edge and mark it and cut it to make sure that it's in a level line using my rather long ruler that I have. And then after that, I'm going to just connect the 2 pieces. I measured the top first and then measured the bottom second, and now I'm just going to kind of connect the lines. Now you can use a straight edge to help you with this, but I just kind of rough cut it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to have to hem the line anyway, and my rotary cutter wasn't helping me, so I actually went and got some regular scissors for this. Next up, I'm just going to cut out my back skirt piece, and this one actually has a very similar angle to the top piece, so I can actually use this kind of scrap part of it to cut it out. And I'm just going to measure and make sure that the length is right and that the width is good, but I just made use of this kind of like scrap edge piece to make sure that everything is right. And now I'm just connecting the dots. It's really that simple. It's like it doesn't have to be crazy angles or perfect lines. It just has to be a fairly good spread. second. Now we're on to our final piece, and this is going to be our side skirt pieces, and I'm actually going to make use of the edge of the hem of this fabric. It does happen to be a curtain that I got at Walmart. I just thought it was fantastic. I loved the color, I loved that it was velvet, and so I'm just going to make use of that. But I measured once again, made sure I found all my right lines, and now I'm just connecting the dots and cutting out my nice little pieces.
Okay, so now we have all of our pieces cut out and ready to assemble. Now, normally we would start by putting all the pieces together and then hemming it last, but we're actually going to do the opposite this time. I normally hate hemming, I save it for last every time, but not this time. Because we are making use of some of the natural hems on the curtain, and it's not on all of them, we want to make sure everything matches up. So we're actually going to hem everything first, because on some of them, the hems are already there along the bottom, some of them the hems are on the side already, but we want to make sure everything lines up first and everything is the proper length before we start putting them all together, because then we would have to shift things around and it's all sorts of weird. So we're going to start on hemming. This is another occasion in which I am forced to pin things, because velvet is a smooth and yet slippery fabric, like satin. And therefore, if I'm not careful, all my hard work in getting good straight lines will have gone completely down the drain, and all of my seams will be off and terrible. So, we are going to be meticulous. I'm going to pin everything, even though I am impatient and don't want to be meticulous and pin everything. Velvet is a fantastic but devious fabric, so be careful with it. Even though it is so soft and so wonderfully smooth. Alright, that is everything hemmed. Now we finally get to the point where we get to start putting things together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the big back piece and we're going to attach it to the two side pieces. Now the front piece kind of stands alone in its way, but I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm going to take a couple of panels and just sew it behind where all those ties are going to be, just in case things get loose and I don't end up flashing anyone, because that would be bad. But we're gonna go ahead and get started, and we are going to attach those two pieces. Alright, luckily sewing two panels together is a little bit easier than sewing a hem on these things. I don't know why hems are my nemesis. I'm coming to know hems are my nemesis. Never thought I had a nemesis, but hems they are becoming my nemesis. Okay, so now that we have our individual skirt pieces all sewn together and hemmed and ready to go, I'm actually going to take something of a little scrap piece and I'm going to sew it in between them. Now in the picture itself, it looks like it just has laces that go from the waistband till about knee length, and I don't think there's anything in between. But on the off chance that those laces start to come undone or they start to space out a little bit more, I want a little added coverage in between those laces just to make sure I'm not flashing anyone. That would be bad. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this is that I'm basically just going to take the big skirt piece and the front skirt piece, and I'm just going to line them up. See, even here we have a bit of a gap. So that is what we call a no-go. But what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to take this scrap piece of fabric and lay it underneath. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew along the seam that's already here to attach it. And then I'm going to take the other piece and then lay it over top of that and do the same thing on the opposite side. Just sewing along the seam that's already there so we don't have anything extra, and just making sure that we have something underneath all of our laces to make sure that we aren't showing more skin than we mean to. Alright, now we have a skirt. Almost. It lines up rather nicely with my knees. And now I have coverage from waist to, I'm going to say, about mid-thigh, which is all I really needed. Just want to make sure I'm not being too scandalous. But the problem we now are having is that somehow I made it what feels like 6 inches too big, which is good for my ego because that means my waist is 6 inches smaller than I think it is, or I did math wrong. Once again, math. It's trial and error, but we're gonna. But this kind of works out because I need to add a zipper to the back. And zippers are a little bit more difficult when you don't have a seam to go already put them into. So I'm going to use some of this extra fabric back here to put one in. Okay, so here is what we're working with. So this safety pin to this safety pin is all the fabric I somehow don't need. So we've got to find a way to make this become this, which is interesting. But the good news is that we were already going to have to add a zipper. That's why I knew there was going to be some extra space, but I expected like 2 inches, not 6 to 8, however many this is. We're not going to measure. It's no point. But what I think I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and sew the waistband onto this from here to here. And I'm going to take this stuff, and for one, I'm going to roll it over and attach a zipper to it, but I'm also going to add probably ruffles to it. That'll help disguise the zipper anyway, and it'll help take a lot of this extra fabric without me having to cut apart the entire skirt. But we're gonna try it, trial and error as we go. Alright, so I'm gonna start with the waistband for the zipper because obviously the zipper has to be able to attach to the waistband as well as the skirt piece. The waistband is not just gonna flop loosey-goosey on top of it. So what I'm going to try to do is line it up just right. And make sure that I have a properly fitting waistband. I'm also going to double check this thing to make sure it's the right size now that I think about it, because it might also be 6 to 8 inches too big. Because if this is, then this might be. So I'm going to double check that. Okay, it was a little long, but now that I have measured it and made sure it is exactly my waist size, I can now use it as a guide to make sure that my skirt now fits my waist. I can start it at the center of that little gap that I had, and then I'll just add pleats or gathers until the space to the left or right of that gap. Let me show you. So I think I figured it out. So I have my waistband piece, and I've double checked it and I've measured it, and I know that it is now the correct width to go around my waist. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a guide to make sure that this is now the right width, circumference, whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it in the middle of this gap of fabric that I need to get rid of, and then I'm just going to gather it up until I lose all the extra, until I get this to here, and then I'll work it my way around the skirt until I get to the other side and do the same thing, add gathers or pleats or whatever to make sure that I lose this extra fabric, and then I'll be able to add in my zipper, and then I'll be able to enclose everything in itself, and then we should be good. Okay, so the way that I think this is going to work, and I think I have it figured out, is I'm going to take the center of the front piece, which I have marked with a pin, and I'm going to match it up to the center of my waistband, which I have marked with a safety pin. And I think if I start from this point and then I work my way around the skirt, then by the time I get to the back, I can start to pull and gather and add pleats, whatever may have you, so I can help get rid of that extra fabric, because now I know that's center. That's exactly where it's supposed to be, and that's where it needs to stay. If I work it towards the center of the wide back piece, then I know that everything is where it should be, and all the gathers will be along this edge towards the back. So now that I have pinned all of the front parts, I now just have this back piece. So I know with this remaining portion of waistband, I've got to get this edge to the center of the back piece, which I marked with this safety pin. So all I got to do is take care of this extra fabric, which shouldn't be too difficult now that I'm really looking at it, because I think I can get away with just one singular large pleat around the zipper, and it should take care of it all.
Alright, so ignoring our waistband problems for now, we're actually going to focus on the zipper. So once you have your waistband attached, we're going to actually have to make a cut to put our zipper in. And so we're going to find the middle of our skirt piece, and then we're just going to cut down as large as we need the opening in the back to be. And then, somewhat counterintuitively, we're going to sew that right back together immediately afterwards. After you get that sewn down, you're going to go back and you are going to open up that seam. And that is where you are going to put this part of your zipper. You're going to face it downward towards the wrong side, and you're going to lay it right along that seam to where it matches up the center of the zipper with the center of that line. And you're just going to pin it in place to make sure it doesn't move. Zippers are notorious, at least in my case, of getting all out of whack and all over the place. They just don't stay still. So you really want to make sure that this is pinned down nice and secure so it doesn't go anywhere. Once it's pinned down and secure, you're going to take your zipper and you're going to sew as close to it as possible. A lot of sewing machines nowadays come with a zipper foot, and it's just the tiniest, most narrow sewing machine foot that you can have, and it's just so that way you can get as close as humanly possible to that zipper without actively sewing on top of the portion that zips and unzips. So you're just going to take it down, turn it all around, and then come back up the other side. Just get sewing as close as possible to that edge. Once it is sewn down and fully attached, the only thing left to do is to take a seam ripper and basically tear open the seam that you just made to put this zipper up against. And that'll just open it up so where now the zipper can open and close easily and without any problems. So long as you did it right.
Alright, zipper attached. I don't know why, but that took me 3 tries for some reason. It was just not wanting to work with me. I'm going to blame the slippery velvet fabric. It is as beautiful as it is tricky. But we are in the home stretch. The only things we have left to do is to sew down the waistband like we did for the other 2 skirts. And then I'm going to add some grommets and some lacing along the front, and then she will be done. Okay, so we are in the final part of this skirt. We are now going to do grommets along the 2 side pieces down basically where my knees are. And I have a nifty new tool for that. This is supposed to make it easier to clamp on grommets onto different materials. I've been doing it with a hammer for a while, and I finally decided to get the tool. So this should be pretty cool. Okay, so let me start off by just saying that this skirt became a whole mood. Like, I went to my jewelry box, I went to my closet, I started grabbing things to style it with, to show it off, and it just kind of grew. I added heavier makeup, I added this scarf. It just became this thing that I loved. I felt so good in it, I looked nice, I felt nice. Whole mood. It's like, and that might just be because it very much so matches my personal aesthetic of very earth-toned, very sleek and simple, but also kind of whimsical, just a tad, just to add a little spice. But it's just like, I thought that it was just such a fun project, and I do think that you can use it in different ways. I don't want to say that this is the only type of outfit that you could pair it with. You could pair it with something a little bit more boho, a little bit more Regency. You could add a soft blouse to it and maybe a thick belt, a couple bangles. You can change this up. This is just what I was feeling today, and honestly, I'm still feeling it. I feel good. But needless to say, this was a project that I greatly enjoyed. I think that it was a very simple and fun project. Like, it wasn't nearly as complicated as I was somewhat expecting. It was just very simple and easy and came out so nice. And I know I'm going to wear this on multiple different occasions. But if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you'll give me a like and a thumbs up. And next week I'm going to have our final for now in the series of skirt videos. It's going to have a completely different vibe than this one. A lot softer, a lot more flowy, and just a very different vibe, but still very, very cute. So I hope you will join me for that. And until then, until next time, live a life full of love and enjoy it. I know I did today. Till next time.